Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Shannon, and today we're going to do a book purge. So this past weekend, instead of me actually doing things that I needed to do, like laundry, grocery shopping, I got it into my head that I absolutely had to tear apart all of my bookshelves and purge some of my books. It had to be done immediately. So I've put some of the books back, as you can see, but I'm still going through all of my books. But this is going to be the first iteration of my purge. I do this like every couple of years, but I think it's probably time for me to do it more often because my collection really is getting too big and I just don't have enough space to be keeping all of the books that I have. So let's get started. As I mentioned a couple videos ago, I'm trying to work through a whole bunch of books that I've had in my collection a really long time, that I've read in the past and kind of forgotten about, but I've kept them around for many years in hopes that I would reread them. And that's what I'm going to try to do this year. So I actually have pulled out a good portion of the books that I want to reread and then get rid of, either pass them along to a family member or put them in a little free library or something like that. I do have more in my collection that I possibly want to reread and pass along, but these were the ones that immediately jumped out at me. She's Come Undone by Wally Lamb. I read this in the 90s and I've kept it around for 25 years. So I think it's time for a reread and to pass it along. This was part of Oprah's book club. And if you remember from my BookTube newbie video, Oprah's book club had me in a chokehold. And you'll see in this stack that most of the books here are from the Oprah's book club. This is about a young girl coming of age in a really difficult situation. I do remember really liking it, and I do remember that it was kind of heavy. So I do have to be in the right frame of mind to reread this. And these are in no particular order. I'm just grabbing them. Next up is Nicholas and Alexandra by Robert K. Massie. This is actually a biography of Russia's last Tsar, Nicholas II, and his wife, Alexandra. And this was actually written in the 60s, I believe. And I read this a really long time ago, but I'm going to reread it and get rid of it because I already have a couple of biographies on Alexandra that I'd rather keep in my collection, and this is just taking up space. And since it's been written in the 60s, it's probably a little bit outdated. So I will just reread it in case there was anything I wanted to remember, and then I'll pass this along. Daughter of Fortune by Isabel Allende. Again, another Oprah's book club pick. Read this many years ago. I have never reread it. This is about a young Chilean woman and her adventures from Chile to California during the California gold rush. I don't actually remember anything about this book, so and I can't remember how I felt about it, so it is due for a reread. This book, I do remember how I felt about it, and I was really disturbed by it. However, I kept it because it was so emotionally impactful, and I knew eventually I would probably want to reread it, but this is another book where I really need to be in the right frame of mind. The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver has been mentioned a lot lately because her latest novel, Demon Copperhead, has won a Pulitzer, I believe. And I first read Barbara when this came out in the 90s, and I was so affected by it. I was just very disturbed by it. So I'm probably going to have a hard time rereading this, but I do want to do it because it has been like over 20 years since I read it, and I do want to see how I feel about it now that I'm an adult, because when I first read it, I was barely an adult. So I do want to see if anything has changed for me. And this is about the family of this evangelical Baptist who basically uproots his entire family and drags them to war-torn Congo in the 1950s. Congo was trying to get their independence from Belgium, and then a lot of things happened to this family throughout that whole ordeal. I don't know when I will get to this to reread it, but I do plan on removing this from my collection after I reread it. The Disastrous Mrs. Weldon by Brian Thompson. This is a biography on some Victorian woman, Georgina Weldon. I can't even remember why she's important or why there's a biography about her and why I wanted to read about her. But, you know, I love Victorian novels, so maybe I thought that reading a bunch of biographies on Victorian women would be interesting. Inez of My Soul by Isabel Allende. This is actually the second Isabel Allende book in this stack. I do have a couple more of her books that I haven't read yet, but this one I read many years ago. This is about a young woman named Inez who flees Spain during the time of the Spanish conquest of South America. So she makes her way to Chile, and I think it's just about her adventures making her way through Chile. On Beauty by Zadie Smith. I read this a really long time ago. I don't actually remember what it's about. I do have another book by Smith, White Teeth, that I do remember really liking, and I am keeping that in my collection. Smith also has a bunch of other books out that I really want to check out. Most recently, I saw her first, I believe it was her first play. She did an adaptation of The Wife of Bath by Chaucer. It was called The Wife of Willesden, and that came through Massachusetts, I think, last year, and I saw a production of it. Really amazing. Loved it. I actually do like Smith's writing, so I just don't remember how I felt about this, except that I know I didn't like it as much as White Teeth, because I feel like I would have remembered it if I liked it more than White Teeth. Where the Heart Is by Billie Letts. Again, have had this for a really long time. Another Oprah's Book Club selection. And this is about 17-year-old Novalee Nation who is pregnant, finds herself giving birth in a Walmart. I think there was a movie made a long time ago with Natalie Portman. I do remember liking this book, but I've only read it the once. I've never reread it. So I'll give it one more reread and then get rid of it. Second book from Wally Lamb. I Know This Much Is True, another Oprah's Book Club. I remember having such a reaction to this book. This book is absolutely heartbreaking and beautiful. And I know I'm going to have to be in the right frame of mind to reread this. I've kept it for so many years in hopes of rereading it, but I've just never been able to bring myself to do it. But I probably won't keep it because, you know, reading it a third time in another 20 years, most likely not going to happen. I do want to check out some of other works by Wally Lamb. I know he's got, you know, a whole collection of stuff that I haven't read. 9 Parts of Desire, The Hidden World of Islamic Women by Geraldine Books. This is actually one of my college books. I read it for a women's studies course, and Geraldine Brooks was a foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, and she spent several years covering the Middle East. And this is just a book on things that she observed about women in the Middle East. It might be a little outdated now, so that's why I want to reread it and just make sure that there's nothing that I want to take out of this and make notes or whatever, but I probably will get rid of it. I haven't reread it since college. Another college book, The Mouse That Roared, Disney in the End of Innocence by Henry Giroux. I remember really liking this book and having my mind blown by reading it. This is basically Giroux exploring how Disney became basically a political force in shaping images of public memory, producing children as consuming objects, and legitimizing ideological positions that constitute a deeply conservative and disturbing view of the roles imparted to children and adults alike. So I really remember enjoying this book, but it might be actually a little outdated because this is from like 1999. And, you know, Disney has been doing so much stuff since then. So I'm going to reread it, take out some notes that I find important, and then pass it along. It's just probably outdated by now. The last college book is Global Feminist Politics, Identities in a Changing World. Again, this is from like the late 90s, early 2000s. It's probably outdated by now. I have like bunches of highlights in here. So I'm going to go through it and see if there's anything that I want, any notes that I want to pull out so that I can remember. But I haven't read it since college, so there's no reason for me to keep this. All right, so those are all the books that I want to reread and get rid of. This next stack is a bunch of old theater books that I've had for many, many years when I was a performer. I haven't performed in, like 8 years, and I just don't need these hanging around anymore. I still do have a pretty significant collection of books on theater, performing, plays, etc. But these ones I just don't need anymore. So the first is a copy of Othello. I already have a big book on Shakespeare's plays that have everything, so I don't need this separate copy of Othello. The Actor's Scene book. I'm not a student anymore, so there's no reason for me to be practicing scenes. I no longer need that book. Monologues for Young Actors. As you can see, I am not young, so this is just, not appropriate for me anymore. I do still have a lot of books on monologues in case I ever do get back into performing and I need to grab one for an audition or something, but this is specifically geared to younger people, teenagers, 20s, stuff like that. These are just not appropriate anymore. Neil Simon monologues. I have a bunch of Neil Simon plays, so if I need to find a monologue for a Neil Simon play, I can just go digging through the actual plays. I don't need a full book of monologues. A practical handbook for the actor. Again, I don't really need this anymore. And anything that I've wanted to take away from these books, I've already actually written in a separate book. I have a whole notebook full of, theater notes that I've pulled out of my favorite books, and this would be one of them, so I don't need that. Voice in the Actor by Cicely Berry. I don't need that. How Not to Audition, Avoiding the Common Mistakes Most Actors Make. A Challenge for the Actor by Uta Hagen. Uta Hagen was a very well-known acting coach, and I read this a really long time ago. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably put this on Pango Books or something for like $1 so that maybe a theater student can find it. I do believe that this is still being used in theater schools, and for me to put it in like a little free library or to donate it, I think it would be a waste because I don't think the right people would find it. And sometimes on Pango Books, I find really obscure editions of things. Next is The Art of Acting by Stella Adler. Again, any information that I need from this, I've already extracted, and I will probably also put this on Pango Books for like $1 just in case an acting student is looking for it. So this last stack of books, I'm going to have my mother and sister go through before I donate these books. First, we have a full set of Anne of Green Gables series by Lucy Maud Montgomery. I love the Anne of Green Gables series, and I have a beautiful hardcover collection, so I don't need the duplicates, but I'm almost tempted still to keep it just because I've had this series for so long. But I don't think my sister has a set, so I think maybe I'll give this to my sister. Same for Emily of New Moon by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is a series, and again, it's a duplicate. I already have hardcovers of these, so my sister might like to have these for her collection. All right, these are some Barnes & Noble mass market classics. The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This is a duplicate. I already have another copy of this. The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. My Antonia by Willa Cather. And The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. All of those are duplicates, so I'm going to pass those along. This is a collection of 2 books by E.M. Forster, A Room with a View and Howard's End. This is a duplicate. I already have other editions of those books. The Making of a Marchioness. I already have another edition of that. The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. I love this book, but I have another edition of it. It's a duplicate, so I don't need to keep 2 versions of this book around. My mother will enjoy reading this. I love the movie. It's one of my favorite movies. Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. You've already heard me talk about this. I did a review of it. I am not going to keep it. I am going to pass this along. An old copy of Little Women. This is an old Barnes & Noble hardcover. I went through a phase where I removed all of the dust jackets on my books. But this is a duplicate. I already have another version of Little Women. The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is a duplicate. This is actually a pretty nice version, but I don't like how it's like one of those soft covers. I have another edition that's an actual hardcover, so I'm keeping that one. My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. Again, this is a duplicate. I already have another edition of this. I think my mother will enjoy having this. It almost seems like it hasn't even been read, but it has. I know I read it. Some more Daphne du Maurier, Rebecca and Jamaica Inn. These are duplicates. I already have other editions of all of these books, so I think my mother will enjoy these. Love Rebecca. Have always loved Rebecca. Jamaica Inn, I did not love. I don't know, maybe it was just I was expecting something different. I don't know what I was expecting, but I did not love it. Dr. Zhivago, this is actually a brand new book, and I already have a copy of Dr. Zhivago, so I don't know how I ended up with two. My mother will definitely enjoy this book. I loved the movie when I was a kid, the 1960s movie. I think it was 1960s. Absolutely loved it, but I've never read the book. All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a duplicate. I managed to get a hardcover. I absolutely love this book, and I wanted a hardcover for my collection, so I will pass this on to my mother. And lastly, The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. Again, I absolutely adore this book, and I managed to snag it in hardcover for my collection, so I don't need this duplicate, and I will pass this along. So that is it. How many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
2 hours later.
49 books. That's actually not too bad. I wonder if I can find another one to make it around 50. See what I can do.
Okay, editing Shannon here, and I did find a 50th book, and that is Finale, Late Night Conversations with Stephen Sondheim by D.T. Max. I really didn't enjoy this book, and I just finished it only a couple of days ago, so I will talk about it more in my April wrap-up video coming out in a week or so. Like I said, I didn't enjoy it, so I'm going to put this in that pile of unhauled books.
Well, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next time. Bye.